Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are back with more Autobiography of a Freedom Writer. We'll be starting Chapter 7, Friends of the Spirit. So, yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this. Riding in a car along the major highways through Mississippi, whether in the front seat or the back, Negroes always had to be on guard. The experience was not unlike being under constant threat of attack, whether it was the indignation of having to relieve oneself on the side of the road because public restrooms at gas stations were not open to blacks, or the insecurity of pulling up to the bumper of a pickup truck that had a shotgun lying in the back window. As more people became aware of the growing Mississippi nonviolence movement in the wake of the Freedom Rides, our group of student activists at Tougaloo started mobilizing larger numbers of black voters. Actively working for social change wasn't something you did to be cool. Dory Ladner recalled when I saw her just last year at a civil rights veterans conference in Mississippi. It wasn't a party, Dory said. It was a commitment. With other veterans and college students, she sat on a panel the state of young people about the state of young people engaged in work for social change. We were like zealots, she said. We used to say, put your body in the movement. Once you got into it, you were in it. You couldn't just be there and say, I'm going to sing and not get involved. People would try to kill you, she said with emphasis on kill, and paused to sit up in her chair. We were a threat to their white Mississippian way of life. Dory and her sister Joyce grew up in a small black community south of Hattiesburg called Palmer's Crossing. They had come to know Medgar Evers from their experience volunteering with the NAACP youth in that area. Their engagement in SNCC was actually death defying. The Ladner sisters were arrested many times for their movement activities. Several years later, prior to the Freedom Rides, white individuals from various parts of the nation, come some from foreign countries, had already been journeying into Mississippi to teach the black colleges as part of an organized opposition to segregation. Many were tormented by law enforcement, but they never wavered from their commitment. At the same time, students from Millsaps, the all-white Methodist school in Jackson, would sometimes join in protests or stage demonstrations of their own. Millsaps students occasionally joined our group of student activists at Tougaloo in what became known as strategy sessions. The meetings were held in the campus home of Chaplain Ed King and his wife Jeanette. Some of the whites, especially those from the Jackson area, had never sat in a room with black people their own age. As a precaution, Ed always kept a bright porch light on as people arrived. It was necessary in those times for anyone opening the door to see clearly who was knocking. There were many times when Ed and Jeanette would bring a particular racist problem to our attention and then leave it up to us as to how we would handle things. There would be times when the Kings or some of the rest of us felt that particular demonstration would be too dangerous. Our question to Ed uh, would then become, is it really necessary that we protest this issue? Of course, that was a question we had to answer personally. However, things were made much easier by friends like Peter Stoner, who would invariably say that we had no choice. We had to go. At that point, we knew that he was right. Pete, a white male from Pennsylvania, came to Mississippi as a freedom rider from Montgomery, Alabama on July the 2nd, 1961. He remained in the state and participated in voter registration campaigns. He enrolled at Tougaloo, where he volunteered for many civil rights projects. Pete was arrested June the 2nd, 1962, for picketing in front of the federal building in Jackson. It is said that uh, he went to local jail to see Lawrence Guillot, who had been arrested in a demonstration. Guillot was one of the lead organizers from the Mississippi Gulf Coast and had come to work in the Jackson movement. He would later become chairman of the Freedom Democratic Party because he was not allowed to see Guillot in jail. Pete protested so vehemently that he himself was arrested. I knew Pete as a person who wanted to be where the action was. Uh, Whenever a protest was taking place, or even if he was just in the process or of being planned, Pete was ready to go now. He worked in many small towns in the Mississippi Delta. He remains a loyal soldier for freedom in the state of Mississippi and lives in Jackson. In November of 1961, I started to become better acquainted with Joan Trumpauer, a young lady who'd come to Mississippi as a freedom rider and told me her relatives were Old Line, Georgia. Joan generously shared her own retrospective on why she chose to involve herself in the struggle for racial justice in the previous chapter. Joan was friendlier than Charlotte Phillips, a bookish transfer student from Swarthmore College near Philadelphia, who was from New Jersey, and Patsy Matthews, a bouncy, happy-go-lucky young lady from Wisconsin who smoked cigarettes. Prior to the enrollment of Pete, Joan, Charlotte, and Patsy, the only white students who had attended Tougaloo College were the children of white teachers. Joan and I were close. We would speak to each other for hours on campus about any subject on earth. As she spoke to me, it was as if I could see her looking into the sphere of a better world. She spoke of a world that she wanted to see exist. She spoke of freedom and love, not just for my folks, but of her folks as well. She spoke of her concern about why the world in general, and especially Mississippi in particular, were not ready were not already better places. It was these long conversations that forced me to look within my being and ask, why do I feel the way I do? Is in what is what I feel inside what I should feel inside? Is there room for change? Joan helped place a shining light on the long needed answers. The word equality now had a clearer meaning. During many of our long talks, Joan appeared to express the belief that nonviolence and passive resistance were secondary components of the movement. She felt that these principles were somehow not interwoven with the greatest bond, and that the compassion was the glue that held the movement together. She honestly believed that all the movement people had developed some kind of extreme humbleness and a love for humanity. My expression to her was always that nonviolence and passive resistance were not for me just a tactic, but a way of life. At the expense of her own well being, Joan was always trying to help someone. After starting a family, Joan worked in the uh, Arlington, Virginia elementary schools for 30 years. She wanted to make sure that her young students started life with the respect for all humankind. Our relationship was not about physical encounters. We both had an agape kind of unconditional love for family and mankind. We knew that we were on a journey. Where that journey would lead us, we did not know. But we knew that the journey would not allow us to be complacent. Because of our true agape love, we were forever bound, and we knew that it was not our words that mattered. It was our attitude and what was in the heart that mattered. Our interests were being directed by the teachings and the spirit of Jehovah. Ah, God, my shoulder. Excuse me, I just dropped the book and it tore a sore shoulder. Ah. Of course, there were times when I was ridiculed by members of my own race because of my perceived relationship with Joan. Those were very, very depressing moments because I knew that I was right. But on the other hand, I thought that I understood the feelings of those who disapproved of the perceived relationship. During those very trying times, it was Joan's thoughtfulness and strong support that pulled me through. No, no one, not even Joan, will ever understand the importance of her being in my life during those times. Some at Tougaloo said, "Why are you so friendly with Joan and members of the other races?" I believe that it was not a matter of my being so friendly with Joan and members of the other races, but those relationships were so overt to others that they sometimes saw it as improper. It was my way of dealing with all people without bias. I think that I did that, and I'm proud of it. Being proud of my treatment of different races may be attributed to my family and training. My grandmother was of Caucasian heritage. Also, after the first semester of my freshman year in college, one of my roommates was always a foreigner, including Ng Yan Keet of Hong Kong, Dindyal Mahabir of India, Fitz Waif of Paraiso Canal Zone, and Peter Wong of Hong Kong. I think that to a certain extent, a role of being was being played in my relationships with my foreign fellow students at Tougaloo College. I saw them as individuals who were there to help. Because of this, I wanted to do all I could to protect them and to make them feel comfortable. But I was most closely associated with Joan Trumpauer because to me, she was a lot more than just a white person at a black college. She was there because of her philosophy and her commitment. Joan was not there to just gain friendship, but to make a difference, and she did. She made a difference. Joan was for real, and I loved her for that. She never allowed her whiteness to overshadow relationships. In dealing with her, I never flaunted blackness. Our relationship was one of cold reality, so yes, we were both pricked by the pins of the perception of life as it had been taught to us. But we knew that we wanted this world to be a beacon of truth. In the movement, Joan Harris Nelson Trumpauer was my best friend. To this day, she indeed remains my friend. She will always be my hero. So, yeah, we'll end that piece right there. But, yeah, he talks about some of the people, his white friends in the movement. And especially there, we talk about Joan Trumpauer. And he makes it clear agape love. It's not physical, it's not sexual, it's a friendship love, a love for her as a fellow human being. But yeah, um, we get a look at a further look at some of the white uh, allies in the movement for civil rights in Jackson, Mississippi, and even at Tougaloo College. But yeah, I'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, later.